Hello everybody. Earlier today I was thinking about the Final Fantasy openings and how much of a huge part of the experience they used to be in Final Fantasy. I remember when I was a little kid just seeing a Final Fantasy opening or like CGI cinematic would like blow my mind. And it's very clear that early on Square Enix really cared about graphical fidelity, even back before they were Squaresoft, or even before they were Square Enix, and back when they were Square. Even Final Fantasy 1 and 2 tried to push the envelope graphically by showing things other RPGs of the time would not show, such as you swinging your weapon. And so it really went the series really went above and beyond to try and show like the best graphical quality possible, and the ultimate showpiece of that graphical quality were the franchise's amazing pre-rendered cutscenes. And now, these aren't so much of a focus anymore, but they were such a focus in the 90s and early 2000s that they would even go back to older games, and when they re-released those games, they would include CG cutscenes in Final Fantasy 1, 2, and 3. So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to go back through all of them, and I'm going to kind of talk about my thoughts on them and see what, see how they've grown and changed over time. So, yeah, let's check it out, shall we? So what I'm going to be doing here is I'll be going through each opening on its own, and I'm going to be avoiding any spin-offs. I'm also going to be avoiding any sequels to individual games or expansion packs in the case of 14 and 11. So we're going to be going one by one through the numbered titles. So this is for Final Fantasy 1. This was originally the PS1 release. This opening was made for the PS1 release Final Fantasy Anthology, which was released in 1999, which I believe comes after Final Fantasy 7 and 8. So this is Square Enix's attempt to basically pitch Final Fantasy 1 to a post-Final Fantasy 7 and 8 audience, which is a very, very different audience to the one originally made. So right off the bat, way more anime than the original Final Fantasy 1. This is actually I don't know if this is the first appearance of the Warrior of Light design outside of the art book and the logo, but it is interesting seeing it like this. It's also showing a fight with a dragon, which very strong fantasy imagery, but not exactly strong Final Fantasy imagery, because I actually don't remember a notable fight with the dragon being in Final Fantasy 1, at least the PSP version that I played. Now, if this was a fight with like the War Mech or one of the Fiends, that'd be one thing, but he's fighting the dragon, so it's kind of weird. That being said, I really do enjoy this design of the Warrior of Light. However, it is very, very strange none of his companions or party members are here. It's just a one-on-one fight between the Warrior of Light and a dragon, which is not exactly accurate to what goes down in Final Fantasy 1 unless it's a challenge run. However, what this does do is it gets people hyped up to fight a fucking dragon, and more accurately to play a very hardcore, pure fantasy game outside of the War Mech and the time travel stuff at the end. But yeah, this is, like I said, Square Enix's attempt to pitch Final Fantasy 1 to a post-Final Fantasy 7 and 8 audience, and so it's interesting to see what kind of choices they make in these openings. Not much to say on this one other than that, though. Man, this opening is way too cool for Final Fantasy 2. Like, I'm genuinely really impressed with what they pulled off here in terms of just like representing the narrative of Final Fantasy 2 in a way that gives this game way too much credit. So, for those who don't know, Final Fantasy 2, unlike Final Fantasy 1, is a story of war. Final Fantasy 1 is 4 heroes arrive to save the day. This is about 4 normal people who basically have to rise and become heroes to fight against an evil empire. Right there we have the Emperor, Palamecia, who is notable for making deals with, well, hell and the devil. It's one of the few games in which Satan is mentioned by name, which is pretty funny to me. But yeah, he makes a deal with Satan, and he basically sells his soul to basically become the most powerful person alive. Here we have our 3 main characters. We have Firion, Guy, and Maria. I'm going to talk a bit about their character designs for a second. First off, this opening fucking does Maria dirty, and she's not that much of a character to begin with. She's just a really cool portrait. I've always liked Maria's portrait, and I kind of got an idea of her personality based off that portrait, and this is not it. Squeaking, running little Japanese girl does not strike me as Maria. However, they nail Guy and they nail Firion. Firion looks a bit different than he does in Dissidia or in his portrait, but yeah. Now what they do get right, however, is the fucking Emperor or the Empire soldiers. They are shown as these demonic, almost like machine creatures. And what we're seeing here is actually the opening of the game. Now, much like in the actual game, Leon comes in late to save the day. Yep, there she goes. Maria needing to be helped. But yeah, I fucking love this fight. Reminds me a lot of some of the fights in like Final Fantasy XIV and 12 later on. And here comes Firion to save the day. He's shown as a bit more roguish in this opening, which is kind of what we get from him in Dissidia. Just embeds one in his eye and then his throat. It's so fucking cool. And you kind of get the idea that these are like a ragtag group of kids who just are doing the best with what they have. And the only one who really seems to have any formal training is Leon. And here they are running away. We're going to get a good look at Maria here in a second. So yeah, Leon, Leon doesn't really look like Leon. Guy kind of looks like Guy. Firion doesn't look like Firion, but you can kind of see the similarities. This is not Maria. Maria does not look like this. Maria does not appear this way. She has long, curly blue hair, a very, like, length... I guess a very statuesque face is what I describe, and the fucking boob window is ridiculous. And this plays out very differently in the game, too. The three of them nearly get beaten to death, but are then salvaged afterwards by the rebellion. But yeah, pretty cool opening. It's just interesting seeing how they interpret things from the game in order to make something to sell you on it. Yeah. Also, not a fan of that showing up. But yeah, like Final Fantasy II opening. What do I think of it? It's pretty rad. They get some things wrong about the game, but the things they get right, they get really right. So I'm kind of conflicted about it. I think Maria's design's goddamn terrible compared to her portrait in the game. However, overall, I think it's pretty cool. And it's interesting that the Final Fantasy II opening does such a great job at selling the adventure and selling the world to you, because this this one, in my opinion, this opening does the best job of selling you on the world and just making you feel like you want to be there, you know? This is an opening that shows you a grand adventure that you just want to be a part of. So this one right here, this is an interesting one because it's not just for a re-release, it's for a full remake of Final Fantasy III, released for the Nintendo DS, mobile, PSP, and Steam later on. So interesting thing about these characters right here is originally they were all the same character. They were the simple Onion Knight, and throughout the game you would gain new jobs and classes that would allow you to customize them. Now in this one, they still have the Onion, they're technically all still the Onion Knight, and they're all still the same stat-wise, but they have their own unique personalities and storyline. Really great here is just the experience of riding a chocobo is just kind of shown here, and I think it's so much fun, the idea of riding a chocobo or an airship. These are things that are unique to Final Fantasy, and kind of show the problem with the dragon thing earlier is that showing an airship and some chocobo, that's fucking Final Fantasy. Showing a dragon, it could be anything, really. Now, and also, another thing here is they've really got the aesthetic of Final Fantasy down pat at this point. This is post-Advent Children, this is post-Kingdom Hearts, and so they have a really good idea of what Final Fantasy characters look like. And so yeah, we could actually see that they're using different classes and weapons throughout the opening to kind of show the job system and how, like, in the game you can actually change up their classes and equipment and stuff. I also love this, like, little moment right here where they're all in the cave taking care of each other and healing up their wounds. I think they did a really good job of translating the sprites or the like the little chibi 3D models to these CG characters right here. I think it looks really nice. And the music, holy shit, the music. They did an amazing job of, like, you know, taking the game's soundtrack and applying it to the opening in a way that makes you just kind of feel emotional, you know? This entire opening is made up from different tracks from the game and using the different motifs from from Final Fantasy III, both original and in this case the remake. So now we get to see some of the floating islands you get to visit later in the game, and most importantly, we get to see the Circus Tower, the final dungeon in the game, and what many people consider to be one of the most frustrating Final Fantasy dungeons in terms of just, you know, difficulty. Get to see the airship. This just does such a great job at making you feel like you're about to go on a grand adventure. And I remember thinking exactly that when I put this game in my DS back in like 2010. And then we have the Master Crystal from the beginning that set the heroes on their journey in the first place. Just brilliant. Fucking brilliant. So, Final Fantasy IV. Not gonna lie, I had to kind of look up some of these characters and refresh myself on what actually happened in the games. But the crystal in this one plays a very different role than in 3. It's kind of a symbol of the turning point in Cecil's life. For those who know, Final Fantasy IV is basically a big redemption arc about a character named Cecil, who starts as a murderer basically starts as a soldier for this empire, and he's just like a horrible murderer, and he does bad things because he's told to, and he begins to question himself and go on a journey to kind of redeem himself. That's Cecil right there. He is a Dark Knight, and there's Rosa, his girlfriend slash friend, who wants the best for him, but they're part of this society, you know? And what this opening does a really good job of is just showing how grand the narrative is, and does a great job of just showing off the different characters and their relations. The silent judgment of Kain Highwind, who's kind of his keeper after this point, and one of the other characters in the story who's under the thumb of the Empire, but from a very different position. They're people who work within the Empire and don't, you know, but they're victims like a lot of others. Here we have Yang, our monk, and what this opening really wants to do is just get you hyped up for these different characters, you know? The Spoony Bard, that's all I remember him as. Kain Highwind, Palamon Porum, kind of showing off their thing. We have Edge, the ninja, which is one of the classes that was in 3, so it was nice to see an actual character based around this concept. One of the bosses, the airship that you get fairly early on. And the party hanging out together. Cecil's ass looks great, by the way. Here we have Rinoa, one of the first, actually the first summoner in the series as far as I know, right? Not entirely sure. The different crystals. Now, crystals are less a driving point in the plot and more objects to be taken, in the very beginning at least. I don't remember what this tower is called, but I remember the fight with the giant mech. That part was sick. Here we have the Empire going up against that mech sent from the moon. The rivalry between Cecil and Kain. And finally, we have Cecil's redemption, changing from a Dark Knight into a Paladin. We have Golbez and his guys and all the bosses you'll be fighting in the game. This mostly just feels like a really cool anime opening, you know? If FF4 was an anime, it would probably have an opening just like this. Golbez is so sick. I just love the idea of just a dude in full plate armor who's a wizard, you know? I'm gonna stand here and tank it. You can hit me all you want. I'm gonna keep casting these spells. And finally, the awakening of the Lunar Whale, my favorite airship in the series. I fucking love this thing. And yes, you do go to the moon. Final Fantasy IV is crazy, guys. Anyway, my thoughts on that opening is ultimately it just succeeds at everything Final Fantasy III did, but tying it into a more personal narrative with the characters, you know? And that's really what 4 is all about. It's the first Final Fantasy game, aside from 2, to really be about a core set of characters and really focused on following their journey in depth. So going into this one, I was kind of expecting to be disappointed. I got a bit more than I was bargaining for. So Final Fantasy 5 and 6 are kind of a tragic situation in which that Final Fantasy 3 and 4 got the love that a lot of people argue that 5 and 6 should have gotten. Well, I'm gonna have to back this up a second before we get into this. But Final Fantasy V is a kind of comedy story game similar to Final Fantasy III, with a real focus on the job system, and it's actually better in every way in terms of the job system. Like, 5 just has a better job system. 4, story-based game with really interesting gimmicks in combat for its characters. 6, story-based game with an interesting gimmicks in combat for its characters. And it's better in a lot of ways. Most everyone who's a Final Fantasy fan agrees that 6 is better than 4. And so when 3 and 4 got that love, we were really hoping that 5 and 6 would get it as well. They did not. And neither did their openings. And so, let me rephrase what Final Fantasy V is supposed to be. It is a goofy, lighthearted comedy game. It's got a lot of goofy comedy. It's really humorous and lighthearted. So why, oh why, the fuck is its opening nightmare fuel? I'm not just scared of Moogles. I'm not just scared of Moogles. That's how they're pronounced. I'm not scared of Moogles. I'm not a fan of Moogles, but this shit is dire, right? This shit's really, really creepy and doesn't exactly fit what Final Fantasy V's about. Look at that shit! Like, can you believe this? It's so fucking disturbing. Why is it like this? This opening is nightmare fuel in many different ways. So this right here, I'm not a fan of it. I don't like the use of text to kind of show the story in this opening that's supposed to be very visual. But like, look at this. This tone's fitting for Final Fantasy VI. Look at this man he's done. He just got vaporized. I'm like, okay, this is where it's gonna turn around and get real lighthearted, right? It's gonna be a bit more cheery now that we're here and we got the magical flying purple dragon. No. Evil death battles between bugs and dinosaurs, or dragons in the sea. I actually kind of like this character. She's pretty rad. But then we get a good look at these character models. So even when the opening is trying to show off its cast and tie more into the adventurous tone of the game, like early CG leads to some nightmare fuel characters in my opinion. Like, look at this. I think that's Alexander. I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know that much about 5, but Jesus Christ. Like I said, this is kind of supposed to be a comedy game, a lighthearted adventure, so the comedy, I think it's they're trying to make this like seem really cool, you know, really cool and epic. But with the weird models and the music just kind of being grating on your ears, it just, it's very creepy, you know? And here we have Exdeath, which again I think is a really cool design. Look at his fucking potato helmet. It looks like it's melting. His helmet looks like it's melting. Look at that. His helmet's got a double chin. The void returns to engulf the world. Should mankind hold the four essences, light will be born anew. Do we get to see light born anew? No, we get to see the giant black hole engulfing all of space, including our hero Bartz. Like, Jesus, why? It is going to be such a contrast when you actually start the game and see like the goofy character interactions and shit. Or about how like the final boss of the game is an evil tree. Anyways, what do I think of that opening? Horrifically inaccurate to Final Fantasy V, and also really disturbing for me. I don't know why it's so scary. Maybe I'm just weird. Maybe this is like not scary to any of you guys, and it does have the epic feeling, but man, oh man, did they miss the mark with that opening. That's also ugly as shit, by the way. Uglier than the Final Fantasy 1 and 2 openings. I think it's because Final Fantasy VI is re-released. Final Fantasy Anthology released before? Let me double check on the dates. We'll be right back. I gotta check on the dates. Yeah, that shit came out in 1999. Like I said, post Final Fantasy 7 and 8, and it looks worse than 7. Just, man, what a mess. Alright, let's check out 8's opening. Let's check out 6's opening. Maybe it'll be a bit better. Okay, they kind of nailed it with this one. It's still got flaws, but goddamn, Final Fantasy VI is just too good of a game to keep down. Alright, let's talk about it. Really like this opening little graphic here. Big fan of it. Has this kind of creepy otherworldly vibe. I don't like this though. Cut. Just cutting constantly between different scenes later in the trailer. Not a fan. I kind of wish it wasn't here. Also, I apologize for the horrific spaghetti monster faces people will have in this whenever they're not in the immediate foreground. Someone roughly put this opening through an AI upscaler, and it looks bad, but it doesn't look as bad as the blurry PS1 stuff, so I apologize. Feel free to kick the video to a low resolution if you don't want to see spaghetti faces. So yes, here we see a really good representation of the Empire. And I keep saying the Empire in every game, but every Final Fantasy has its own unique take on the Empire. And whereas with Final Fantasy II, it was a lot of demonic shit, this is a lot of just technology. They have basically ruined and damaged their world through overly intense pursuits of science and technology without giving a thought to what it would do to nature or the natural world. And here we have Terra, our protagonist, wearing the crown and having currently been brainwashed by the Emperor. That's not the Emperor, by the way. That's a totally different character. I don't know why they framed it like that. They made it look like he was behind it. Here we have Sabin. He's one of my favorite Final Fantasy characters to play as because of his fucking cool commands and such. So yeah, he's a monk. And now we have... So this whole scene is actually really interesting because we don't get to see this in the game. And it is Terra's preparation for the burning of Narshe, which we don't get to see in the game. Now, once again, I'm not a fan of including the text in the openings, and I'm not a fan here. Commence to launch the attack on Narshe, the coal mine city, because it's fucking English and it's rough. But oh my god, Magitech armor is the fucking coolest. Hey, you know what else is the coolest? Fucking Kefka. Like, man, What a horrific bastard of a villain that guy. You should probably play Final Fantasy VI if you haven't yet. It's one of the older Final Fantasy games that holds up the best. Arguably, it holds up better than games like 7 and 8. But just seeing the inside of the Magitech Armor's cockpit like this, seeing it fire up and come loose, it's just like, Magitech Armor is so cool, man. So, Magitech Armor, for those who don't know, is basically a mech suit, or like think of it like a Metal Gear almost, that uses magic as like a weapon. It has artificial magic that can fire out in like beams and such. It's really rad. Yep. So once again we see Kefka. Not really taking on the forefront of the villain role, because in the beginning of the game, the Emperor is the primary villain, and he is more of like a background character, who's more of a, he works for the main villain, you know? And I thought this would be the end of the opening. I thought it was pretty good and tight here, seeing the launching of Terra's mission, and also seeing what we have in the logo is Terra riding the Magitech armor in the very beginning. However, what do you think you've found? We have this. And this is the opera scene from Final Fantasy VI. This is gorgeous, minus the, you know, horrible AI spaghetti face. We get to see the inside of the concert hall. We also get to see the contrast of, like, the life Celes used to live versus the one she used to lives now. She is a artificial Magitech knight made by the Empire. She's somebody who has been basically forcibly augmented to use magic when they naturally should not be able to. Here we see the deal between Sabin and his brother. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on Sabin's brother's name, the king. Edgar and Sabin. We see their deal, the flip of the coin. We see Locke's rescue of Celes, and we see the contrast of that with her opera scene, which is probably my favorite scene in the whole game, and a lot of people's favorite scene. Here we have Terra in the city of Narshe, and I fucking love this shit. Hold on. Not this part. Not yet. I'm so fucking excited. So here we have the Ghost Train, where we get to see, and it's going back and forth. So we get to see Shadow on the Ghost Train. We get to see the fight between Setzer and the pursuing Magitech airships. And there's something that's rather inaccurate coming up here I want to point out, but I'll point that out when we get there. First off, he didn't solo this train. He had friends with him, but you get to decide who he brings with him. Here we have her in her, we have Sarah's in her dress again, or Celes in her dress. I always get it, I'm sorry, the name changes depending on which version of the game you play. I love the firing of the Narshe, the people in the Narshe soldiers firing at Terra, hoping that they can get a shot off on her right before they're fucking vaporized by a Magitech cannon. And we have horrific spaghetti face Setzer. And here's the inaccuracy. It's coming right up. Oh, not yet. Here we can see Locke. I don't quite remember this scene. I believe this is just them. I believe this is the opera scene once again. So here's the inaccuracy right here. See, we have right here Setzer throwing his magical cards and destroying one of these airships in one shot. This is inaccurate because Setzer is basically fucking useless in the game and barely does any damage at all, you see. And you just kind of keep him in your party because he's pretty. Here we have Kefka in his final form at the very end of the game, where he's basically ascended to God along with his fortress and its Eye of Judgment that he uses to scorch the fucking world. Ironically enough, in-game it's way more horrific. Why do you build knowing destruction is inevitable? I actually like these lines as they are quotes from Kefka. Why do you yearn to live knowing all things must die? So a big thing in this game is the themes of magic versus technology, hope versus nihilism. There's a lot of concepts like that that make the game hold up really, really well, especially today. And here once again we have Ceres stranded and after the destruction of the world, and basically waiting for any chance of hope, any idea that her friends might still be alive after all that has transpired. I didn't talk much about what was going on because basically this just does a fucking amazing job of capturing different scenes from the games. And I got so excited about certain ones that I forgot to talk about the other ones. It's a damn good opening, and it does a really good job nailing what Final Fantasy VI is good at, which makes me curious as to why the 5 one was such a botch. I think it might be because the people that made this opening have a really good strength of like drama and epic fighting and stuff, and Final Fantasy VI just suits that a lot better than 5. They also probably had more time and money to work on it. I don't know specifically as to why, but it's pretty fucking cool. So yeah, Final Fantasy VI. Play it any way that you can. Don't play the mobile port. Aside from the mobile port, play it any way that you can. So on Steam, there's the Pixel Remake. On Switch, there's the Pixel Remake. You know what to do. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and move on to probably the most famous Final Fantasy opening. But before we get to that, I just want to remind you guys down below, you can join my Discord. You can also see me stream live on Twitch where I play mini games, including Final Fantasy XIV. So if you're into that, that's right down there. I hope you're enjoying the video, and without further ado, let's get back to it. Okay, so this opening is actually very, very different from the other ones, because functionally this works the same way a lot of the openings in the old NES and Super Nintendo version of Final Fantasy, whereas it's the start of the game's story, it's just shown in a much fancier way to get you excited. Similar to the walk through the snow with the Magitek armor in 6, or the airship intro in Final Fantasy IV. It's basically meant to just get you ready for the game, introduce you to the story, so it serves a very different purpose than the other openings. That being said, it may just be the best one. I fucking love this opening. A lot of people do. It's iconic. It is the start to one of the most like amazing adventures in video game history. It has this very cosmic start where you're like looking up at the stars almost, like referencing the idea of like the sci-fi nature of Final Fantasy VII and the nature of like Jenova and how it comes from the stars to threaten Midgar. So yeah, immediately right off the bat, you're given this sci-fi kick in the head, which I think is pretty rad. Actually trying to remember how this flows. I'm trying to remember how this flows into the scene. I didn't make note of it when I watched it a second ago, so I'm curious to see where it goes. But what we know now is that these are not stars. These are, in fact, particles of the life stream. And we get to zoom out and kind of see who's on the other side of these particles any second now. There we go. This part has always been interesting to me, because I've always been wondering if she's, like, saying a prayer or if she's just looking at a leak of, Mako making its way out of that pipe, or like maybe where the live stream is kind of peeking through into the surface world. But anyway, Aerith makes her way out of there. I'm going to be calling her Aerith because that's the name I'm used to. And instead of being shown crazy adventures or what you're going to be doing in the game, we are in fact shown the city of Midgar, this crazy cyberpunk city that I and many other people love so much. And we get to see the tower of the Shinra Corporation looming over all of it, as well as the logo. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Brilliant, man. Just brilliant. Kind of almost like the opening shot of Blade Runner, you know? Just shows you the landscape, shows you the setting for where the game's early hours are going to take place, and we're seeing shots of the train, the clouds coming in on, cutting through the calm of the city, showing that this group of, well, cyberpunk rebels are about to kind of turn the game on its head. And it flows right into gameplay too. We get to see the cute little Lego Popeye models that everyone loves / hates so much. And yeah, so Final Fantasy VII's opening, it was the first of its kind. It worked very, very differently, but even so, its unique purpose and like the world it represents makes it, you know, very unique comparatively to the other one. Very unique compared to its later contemporaries. So this one's interesting for me especially, because I've never really played 8. I've seen many, many reviews and retrospectives, and I've heard many people talk about 8. I've always been interested in it, but I've always been scared to go into it because I've heard of the flaws, and some of the flaws people talk about are some of the most frustrating shit I've ever heard. But this opening's fucking awesome. I really like this opening. I've always liked this opening. I just love like the beach, I guess I can talk a bit about. But what this opening kind of does is it serves the same purpose as Final Fantasy VII, introducing you to the narrative and providing an intro for the story, while also showing you flashes of the future and past, which kind of gives it this kind of dreamlike, ethereal quality, especially with these long landscape shots. in quotes from the game later on that the player has no context for. So later on, like, this is such a good opening that after you finish this opening, you're likely gonna have a lot of these quotes in your head and a lot of these moments in your head, especially because you might see it every time you boot up the game. I'm not entirely sure, because I've, again, never played 8. However, we get our introduction to Rinoa. I know her from Dissidia, as well as the mix of, like, just goddamn, this opening's beautiful. I'm sorry, like, that's the biggest takeaway, is that for a PS1 opening, this shit is mind-blowing. And I can see why a lot of people were kind of disappointed in the art style change with 9, because you just go from, like, you went from little Popeye people to this shit, right? You go from little caricatures to fully rendered, beautiful-looking characters. Also, I think the Gunblade's stupid as hell. I don't know, I still haven't changed my mind on it. It's been redesigned in really good ways later on, like in 13, and then, well, 13's my main one. 13 and in 14, they redesigned it really well. But in this one, it's just stupid looking. We could see a bit of Ultimisia and Adia. Well, mainly Adia. And the duel between Setzer and Squall. There seems to be a lot of spite going into this duel, considering it's just like a practice duel thing. Like, a lot of taunting, a lot of shit-talking, and also the fact that Setzer is just trying to fuck up this guy's face. Just stabbing at that face over and over again, and we're kind of seeing flashes, I'm guessing, of his descent into villainy later on. Again, I don't know that much about 8. This fucking music's awesome, though, right? This is the kind of thing that got me excited as a kid, you know? Like, I'd play one game, like I'd play 7, and then I'd see a cinematic like this for 8, and I'm like, oh man, 8 must be awesome, you know? This must be the ride of a lifetime, and like, Square did a really good job with these openings, and with a lot of their CG work, to just make you excited. It's really, and then we have the cut to the face, his iconic scar. What a thumb in the eye, what a pointless fucking move. Flashes of future events. But everything about this opening is supposed to give you the impression that this is like one of the most epic, fantastic love stories ever made. Really rad. Yeah, what a great opening. I still need to play 8. Maybe I'll have different thoughts on this opening when I play it. I'll probably like it a lot more. Maybe my opinion of it will be a lot closer to 6's, where I'm just like, oh my god, I remember that moment, it was amazing, you know? But as of now, I haven't played 8, so I don't know. Really cool opening, though. So, one of the things that makes the opening to Final Fantasy IX so fantastic is it manages to do the thing that 8 did, while still managing to do what 7 did, all at the same time, while creating a single cohesive scene that flows perfectly into the game proper. So, Final Fantasy VII, introducing the game. Final Fantasy VIII, kind of introducing the game, while mostly flashing forward and showing you flashy visuals to get you excited. Final Fantasy IX does a great job at its opening of starting the game's story in a way that is automatically exciting to the viewer. So here we have a dream being had, or a memory, of Garnet that will likely be explained later on. Again, I've never beaten 9, but I've gotten a good chunk of the way through it. Garnet/Dagger. Waking up in the morning, getting ready for the day, and you kind of get this feeling of melancholy from her, you know? She looks concerned or stressed. And with this one, you get to see, much like Final Fantasy VIII's opening, we have much better facial expressions and such, and you get a much better idea. And so we see the sound of the city of Alexandria, and where it's located in the world. It's just fucking gorgeous, man. Here, look how well we can animate birds. Birds for scale. Boom. Alright, we got a statue. Not a statue. It's the stern of a ship. That's right. This is the airship that Zidane arrives in, who we actually don't even see in this opening, strangely enough, right?
Not right!
He's the protagonist, and we don't even see Zidane. Or Zidane, or Zidane, or however you pronounced it when you were playing this game as a child. Zidane is the worst one, though, isn't it? That's pretty fucking bad. Alright, I'm full of shit. We do get to see Zidane. I just forgot about him.
That's right!
Wow, man. I'm winning. Yep, so now we get to see the interior of the airship at the very beginning. And that's the, I think that's the end of Zidane there, because we just continue that scene right where it left off in gameplay when we start off. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of directly leading into what we witness via gameplay. It's like these characters right here that just walk by, you end up talking to them as Vivi. You see Vivi's predicament here. He's lost. He doesn't know where to go. He doesn't know what he's doing. And boom, big intimidating airship with music swelling, just giving you this epic feeling, you know? Or this epic feeling, this excited feeling at the epic adventure that awaits you. However, all the ship is doing is making port to let off all the performers so that they can, you know, give a performance at the concert here in town. Again, it's setting up the story while giving you an impression of something far greater that's going on. All we really saw here was lady waking up, airship arriving, kid getting lost, and immediately we're excited and intrigued because they did such a great job shooting it and scoring it. Anyway, Final Fantasy XI. Final Fantasy IX. I need to play and finish that one, but I liked what I played of it. I liked the chunk of disc 1 that I enjoyed. Anyway, let's check out Final Fantasy X's opening. You know, before we check out this opening, I kind of want to talk about a bit of preamble with this. Final Fantasy X, between Final Fantasy IX and X, marked an interesting time for Square Enix, and it is when they took all of their knowledge of CG and they attempted to make a movie called Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within. I don't have much to say about the movie other than it bombed. It did not do great, and it cost Square a ton of money. Squaresoft lost a bunch of money on it. They had to open and then close a film division by the time it was over, and all of the company suffered because of it. And so what we saw going forward from that point is a lot of sacrifices. Games that looked very good would not have the graphical or the games that looked very good would not have the gameplay depth or openness of previous games. They would be much more linear, restrictive experiences, or the big open experiences would often lack things like voice acting and other such conveniences, such in the case of Final Fantasy XI. And with 14 to this day, most of that game is not voiced. And it is this big open world experience, but there's a lot of downgrades that were made after Final Fantasy X, or after Final Fantasy IX, because of the bad financial decisions that Square Enix had made at the time. For instance, they made this little game called Xenogears. Xenogears, the last half of that game is basically pieced together from cutscenes and text reads. Basically, you have to read the second half of the game because they weren't able to finish it because they spent all their money on a Final Fantasy IX Coca-Cola commercial. I'm not even joking. So we're going to see some changes going forward with each of these games. Anyway, let's check out Final Fantasy X's opening. So, like I said, Square Enix kind of changed after Final Fantasy IX, and here we have the intro to Final Fantasy X. Now, Final Fantasy X, this intro is not actually done in pre-rendered CG. These are in-game graphics. These are the in-game models for different weapons, such as Brotherhood, Yuna's staff, and Wakka's Blitzball, which is studded for her pleasure. Weird fade-ins into scenes. There's so many fade cuts in this game. It's so strange. However, here we get an intro to our characters, all sitting thoughtfully around a bonfire. I actually really like this kind of thing in games, because it's the kind of thing you can imagine them actually doing on the journey, and that we do see them doing on the journey. Yuna, Tidus, Wakka, Lulu, Kimahri, and Riku. In the background, we see the destroyed city of Zanarkand, which we actually don't know yet. We're just being shown this destroyed landscape with this very ethereal quality to it, where we see what seem to be like ghosts or spirits floating above the city. We can hear the lapping of waves and see the water in the distance. We're shown this very post-apocalyptic world, and it's just giving this very somber feeling, like all hope's kind of gone, and they're just trying to figure out what to do next at this point. Here we see our hero Tidus taking a second and looking at the landscape, I'm guessing he's feeling somewhat nostalgic about his old memories of Zanarkand. And, yeah. I actually really like this intro. It's simple, it's honest. I think that's the best way of putting it, is it's not some big, grand, flashy next-gen cutscene. It's just the opening cutscene for an RPG, but a damn good one. They're not trying to blow your mind with fancy visuals. It's just, here's the game, man.
Listen to my story.
Listen to his story.
This may be our last chance.
Voice acting in a Final Fantasy game. I think this is the first instance of it besides Final Fantasy Tactics or that FF2 opening. But yeah, that's the intro to Final Fantasy X. Like, again, no crazy CG intro, no insane fight scenes, just a man staring thoughtfully at a destroyed city, wondering what he's going to do next, and offering to tell you his story. I really like this opening, and for very different reasons than the other ones. I think it's kick-ass. However, it's not quite the intro that people remember for Final Fantasy X. When you think mind-blowing graphics, well, we got one of those. Okay, so I thought about not including this one, but I can't. I can't not include it because when I think crazy Final Fantasy graphics, this is the cutscene I think of. This shit, like, it still looks amazing to this day, you know? This is whenever people think Final Fantasy X opening, this is probably what they're thinking about. They're thinking about the Blitzball sequence and the crazy metal, which is just in contrast with what we just saw is the exact opposite. This is over the top, loud, in your face. Look at all those people. Look at all those people they're rendering. Look at that gorgeous, gorgeous stadium. Look at Tidus's hair. It's so beautiful. But again, story-wise, this is just a moment in the game being animated at a much higher fidelity. Also, I still don't understand the rules of Blitzball. I spent a lot of time playing it. I still don't understand it. Here we have Auron standing over, watching, we're taking a sip of some sake before realizing the shit he's about to have to deal with. In the background, we don't know what the apocalyptic shit we're seeing. If you look in the background just then, we would have saw these giant tubes of water that were going over the entire city. Everyone outside the arena right now is in full-blown panic mode, likely evacuating and such. I just thought this would be fun to include. Also, damn, look at her. That's one bad bitch. Anyway, get launched. But yeah, so we get to see the destruction of Zanarkand at the hands of Sin, the antagonist of this game, which is this giant Lovecraftian entity that oppresses the world and controls basically its future and where it's gonna go. The entire world basically lives in fear of this fucking thing. This is a bit rambly, I may cut this, I don't know. I just thought it'd be interesting to include because, well, it's what I think of when I think of crazy Final Fantasy graphics. And look at this shit. So it's not that they weren't trying to impress with graphics anymore, it's just that opening had different priorities than the other. Square Enix still wanted to blow people's fucking mind with amazing CGI, and this is the opening I think of when I think of amazing Square Enix CGI. And yeah, it's going to shit. This is the inciting incident for the game, the thing that starts off the adventure and basically takes Tidus from being an athlete to being a post-apocalyptic survivor. Anyway, pretty rad, huh? Next, we're going to check out the Final Fantasy XI opening, which I actually have never seen before. I've actually never watched this one before, so this is going to be an interesting first impression for a game that I've played a little bit of, but kind of got scared and stopped. What a fucking crazy underrated opening for what many people consider to be an underrated Final Fantasy game. I barely played this one, but it's something I've always been curious about, and I wanted to try it, but it's always scared me away every time I've attempted to play it. So here we get to hear a bit of a tale of how the world was created from this giant sentient jewel, which then created the gods from its own light. However, lately those gods have fallen dormant. After an age of bliss.
The gods fell into slumber. That world was
so not only does this opening impress with really, really nice graphics, it does a great job of introducing its world and its gameplay, it also tells a story. So we have an introduction to our two main characters here, taking a look at their city that they're moving into, and we get to find out why here soon.
863rd year of the Crystal Era. Vana'diel was in the midst of a great war.
Mm-hmm.
Faced with invasion by the Shadow Lord and his hordes of
Shadow Lord?
Oh, Shadow Lord, I love you, Shadow Lord. Come over here and give Vice a big sloppy kiss, Shadow Lord. Now pull your head out of your goddamn ass and start fucking helping us!
The leaders of the enlightened peoples united their forces in desperate alliance. They were the Kingdom of Sandoria, the Republic of Bastion, the Federation of Windurst, and the Grand Duchy of Juno.
Yeah, sorry for him staying quiet during that part. I wanted to kind of get that out there. So, a big theme of this is the idea of a overpowering threat opposing the people of this world, and how these people must work together to overcome that threat, which is tying really strongly into the main gameplay. From what I've heard, is that it's a very, very difficult game where you must work with others if you want to survive, which is interesting. And it's really cool how they kind of, you know, tie the themes into their opening, because this is probably one of the most horrific Final Fantasy intros I've seen, aside from like maybe 14 and Type 0, of just brutality and misery and sadness. I don't even know what the fuck these things are. They're creepy as hell, they're big and they're scary. And you're definitely giving the impression that, like, though these people are working together and that we have these like larger than life warriors here, they're on their back foot and they're just trying their best to get by against this like overwhelming threat. Like, look at this. Their siege towers are huge. Not only do they have siege towers, they have firearms. Like, this is insane, man. And here we have our protagonist attempting to escape, him and his big sister. We have the mages up on the wall working together to fire off a spell. Which is, I think they're summoning Meteor, yeah. Okay. Summoning Meteor, and it's still not enough. Like, you're really giving the idea of this overwhelming threat of the Shadow Lord and his forces, which I'm just assuming is what they are. And they're also using beasts, such as the behemoths. You're really given this idea of just fear and oppression, and in a very different way than in Final Fantasy VI, or other games that use the Empire motif. Like, yeah, these things just attempted to murder children. Children are not exempt from this, and they need to get the fuck out or else they're gonna die. Like, I think this is the strongest just, hey, here's why you should be afraid of the big villain Empire thing. Because they're just going to annihilate entire cities, and they don't give a fuck, and they got behemoths. Probably the biggest behemoths I've ever seen in a Final Fantasy game, I might add. Look at these things, they're colossal. Are they this big in-game? Fuck if I know. But damn, they're scary. And... this fucking moment. They look up in the sky, and they see their freedom, they see their way out, and the only way that
Aldo, listen.
Aldo's gonna get up there is if he's helped up by his sister.
Sis?
Can you lower yourself down?
I think so.
Jesus.
Sis, are you alright? Emelyn?
Aldo, just run!
Jesus. So yeah, what this opening does a really good job of, besides of just telling a really sad story, is it makes you fucking hate whatever the villains are in this case. Like, hey, you see those bright-eyed little children? We're gonna make you sympathize for them, and then these monsters are gonna fucking kill them. And, yeah. Wow, what a fucking intro to a Final Fantasy game. Especially in a way that, like, both introduces us to a sympathetic character while still showing us the larger issues going on in the world. We're not just told that these things are going to destroy Vana'diel. We're shown exactly fucking how. And the way they do it is just phenomenal. This reminds me a lot of the A Realm Reborn opening, of just telling this fucking story of, yeah, hope in the face of despair, but it does it in a really great way of just showing you what the threat is, giving you a reason on a very personal level to show what this fucking thing is doing to the world and why you should want to fight it. But hey, you know, time goes on. And it's been 20 years now. Town's been abandoned and overgrown. And the kid grew up. And he looks like he's become a bit of a warrior himself. He's looking at the old town he once tried to move in before he got fucking entrapped by giant, weird mutant orc creatures. And he brought some friends with him. And they're going to work together to take it back. And not only does this give the impression of a story, the situation the world's dealing with, but it serves as a fucking call to action for the player base. It's, yeah, you are one of these characters and you're going to work together with each other to fight back this threat and undo the damage it's done to the world. And I really like that message of unity that's in the opening, and really anything and everything I've seen of Final Fantasy XI so far. I really want to try this game out one day and get into it. But, you know, I have Final Fantasy XIV to finish before I want to dive into that. I'm not going to just immediately start up another Final Fantasy MMO when I'm so far in this one, you know? It's a big dedication. Anyway, that's a fucking amazing opening. From what I hear is an amazing game. I can't wait to play it one day. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and check out Final Fantasy XII's opening. So let's talk a bit about Ivalice. Ivalice is one of the most prolific Final Fantasy settings. It got its start in Final Fantasy Tactics, continued in Vagrant Story, continued in Tactics Advance, which was the Game Boy Advance sequel to Tactics. It continued from there into 12, then into Revenant Wings, then into Tactics Advance 2, Grimoire of the Rift, and then finally into Final Fantasy XIV. So, yeah, the world of Hydaelyn, and specifically the country of Ivalice, it gets a lot more love than a lot of other Final Fantasy settings, let's just say that. But it's not due to a sheer popularity of the setting, it's that there's someone on the inside of Square Enix that really has a passion for the setting and wants to see it continued in different Final Fantasy games. And here we get a really bombastic intro to Ivalice and just its unique aesthetic and world. And what this game really wants to do more than anything is to build a unique world. Almost everything you do in the game is within the boundaries of, well, Ivalice society, like your early quests are for a hunting guild inside the town of Dalmasca, or Rabanastre, the city of Rabanastre. There's a unique style to the armor, to the equipment, very similar to Spira in Final Fantasy X. They really wanted to give you an impression of a very unique, almost alien world, you know? All the clothing, all the armor and weaponry are things that you just don't see outside of Final Fantasy XII, you know? You couldn't look at this armor and go typical Final Fantasy armor, because it's so nonsensical in and of itself, you know? So yeah, the world has a very unique flavor and just sense of lore and world building and history. And so we're introduced to some of the main characters. We're introduced to Bosch right here, Bosch von Ronsenberg, who is making his way to the war room where there's no fighting allowed. And
Nabudis has fallen.
Nabudis.
My father?
Nabudis what, sir?
No, not.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry.
But yes, so the kid we just saw getting married is royalty, he's part of the nobility, and he's got to be concerned with the invading Akkadian Empire.
Halt their advance.
Arcadian Empire, right? Not Akkadian, that's real life.
I will go.
And I will go at his side.
Yeah, so this weird-ass crown, these weird-ass haircuts, all of this is meant to give you a very interesting look at, you know, Rabanastre specifically. And so we go from wedding floats to, well, dropships, war machines, getting ready for war. And we also get an interesting look at Rabanastre's technology, where you have a mix of, well, armor, swords, and mounted cavalry with, well, dropships, firearms. It's really interesting how it all comes together. I always found it a bit anachronistic, in my opinion, that in Dalmasca specifically, they use bow and arrow and firearm, or they use bow and arrow and melee combat when they have, you know, big gunships and firearms, but you never know what kind of shit magic will throw into the mix, you know? Being magically enhanced or having access to enchanted items might give you an edge in combat over firearms. We don't know, because we don't have magic in real life. I have always liked this kind of airship design, though, the weird gravity rings that seem to emit a gravity field rather than using aerodynamics, and now so we're shifting to the next stage where we're not prepping for war, we're in the middle of it, and we get to see dogfighting between the different airships. I love this first-person shot from this airship right here. And this is interesting to me because this is a fucking crazy graphical show-off thing. This was the end of the PS2 generation, so they really were able to get the most out of the system's hardware to really show this shit off as much as possible. And it is downright gorgeous. Yeah, even the enemies here have some strange-looking armor that we haven't really seen anything else. Like, I can't look at any of this armor and go like, oh, this is based off of this country in medieval history. It's just all weird and alien. Even their blades are these strange, curved scimitar blades. Here we up. So like I said, archery. We have bow and arrow on horseback alongside like big cannons and firearms and energy weapons. It's so strange. I feel like Final Fantasy XIV does a much better job of balancing the technology. However, they do a really good job of making this world seem unique. Interesting the lack of blood and gore here. Not that there needs to be. It's just interesting seeing them yank it out like that. The feeling of like a blade cutting through meat is there. You just don't see any blood. And it's enough to give you the idea of just the brutality of war. Nope, got him, and there goes our beautiful husband-to-be from the beginning of the opening. Cut down in his prime. I would like to add that if that part of your armor was actually armored, that arrow probably wouldn't have gone through, but who knows. Yeah, it has this weird collar piece that's separate from the chest plate. Super strange. Who knows, that might be how armor actually works and I'm just uneducated. But still, it's very weird looking. Yep. So yeah, we just see the desperation in the face of the Empire once again, but I don't think it does as good of a job of just making you afraid of them as Final Fantasy XI's did. And yeah, so there we go. There's our introduction to our protagonist, Bosch von Ronsenburg, and his attempt to try and, well, salvage the damage that has been done by the Arcadian Empire. And we cut back to see the bride-to-be, broken-hearted and lamenting the death of her husband.
Descend and guide your bodies return to the earth.
We also get a very strong, like, image of the religion in this world. We're hearing a lot of talk about the Great Father, different gods and deities, so this is a very religious society. Rabanastre / Dalmasca. And I would like to point out that we don't see any introduction to the main plot. This is all just backstory and setup. I did say Bosch is our main character, but in reality somebody named Vaughn is our main character, and we don't see him at all in this opening. But yeah, introduction to the world, introduction to the conflict that you're going to be dealing with for the rest of the game. Really cool intro, but man, is it hard to keep track of when you're first booting it up. You're being told all these names, you're being showed all these things, you're just like, Dalmasca, Rabanastre, Arcadia, oh no, the city's gonna fall. Who's my protagonist? Who am I fighting for, /with, /against? And of course, as you play the game later on, it all comes together, but that's kind of a problem Final Fantasy XIV has as well. But yeah, it's not interested in holding your hand in the beginning. You gotta kind of put shit together yourself as you go on and kind of realize your role in this larger world and what it means to you. Yeah, that's Final Fantasy XII. It's a little bit less... The openings always struck me as a bit less graphically impressive than the others, just in terms of like what was popping off at the time in terms of graphical fidelity, because this was the start of the PS3 generation. These kind of graphics weren't all that impressive, but I was still interested in the game. And you can kind of see that Square's like heavy pursuit of graphical fidelity isn't as strong as it used to be, you know? Like that's not, like I don't think 12's opening is that much of an improvement over 10's in terms of graphical fidelity. In terms of the Blitzball arena and what we saw there, there's a lot of similarities, but that could just be limitations of the PS2. Let's see what an opening looks like when it goes next gen. So let me weave you guys a yarn. Let me tell you guys a tale. Back, I don't remember when this came out, to be honest with you, but way back when, I was getting into the Final Fantasy series. I had played 3, I had played 1, and I had really liked those games. And I was super duper excited for the next release in the Final Fantasy franchise. I worked all summer, I saved up money, I scraped whatever pennies together I could to buy Final Fantasy XIII. A game that proceeded to basically torment me for the next 2 years. You see, my parents were very strict about how much game time I had, and so I only got to play this 90-hour game for an hour every week. So, Final Hallway 13 was especially brutal for me, and it was especially infuriating every time I booted up the fucking system and I saw this opening. I saw all these grand places I wanted to go to. I saw all these vehicles I wanted to fly. I saw all these characters I wanted to meet. But because of the limitations of my schedule and just the limitations of the game, I wasn't able to experience these things. And so later on, I got it for myself on the 360. And you know what happened? The same exact fucking thing. The only difference is within a single afternoon, I made up all my progress. And I got further. And I ran into these locations and these characters. And I realized that I still couldn't go to these places. I still couldn't I still couldn't fly these vehicles or experience this world, because what I was in a glass hallway that ran in a straight line, occasionally branching and looping back onto itself with these unlikable, unrelatable characters. And this was not what I got to get. Also, might I point out that y'all are a bunch of assholes for letting Saz hang like that. There have been so many times in which I have people have come up to me and went, "Oh man, Final Fantasy 13 is not that bad. I've been playing it. It's not that bad." I'm like, "Okay, how far in it are you?" And they're like, "Oh, a couple hours. All right. Talk to you next week. We'll see how you're doing." And every single fucking time I ask them again, "How's 13 going?" They get quiet. I have no love for this game. Now, can I give it some credit for at least the things it does well? It's very pretty, and the music is very good. And I like some of the character designs. Like, I like the way these characters look. I like Zaz. I think he's cool. And he seems to be the only reasonable fucking character in the entire game. It's just the moment that any of these fucking pricks open up their mouths, I want to shut off the fucking system. Not a fan of 13. Sorry, guys. Hot take, 13's not very good. Typically, the people that like 13 haven't played other Final Fantasy games, or just have a special love for it in their heart. And you know what? More power to you. Someone's got to love this piece of shit. I'm like, that's it. Nah, no analysis. Fuck Final Fantasy 13. Okay, but like, this title screen is sex, though. You know what? At the end of the day, this music is beautiful, and there's a reason why it shows up in later Final Fantasy games. There's a reason why it shows up in Dissidia, and there's a reason why to be fair to 13, there's a reason why these characters show up in other games. There's a reason why they show up in Dissidia. There's a reason why this music shows up in Theater Rhythm, and there's a reason why like lightning and like the different mounts and costumes show up in Final Fantasy XIV. And it's that all of those things deserve a better video game. Let's talk about 14's opening. So this one was a strange experience for me, because I've clocked many hours into Final Fantasy XIV. Hell, you saw it in the intro of the video. My first thought when watching this was, where the fuck is this? And I had to think about it for a minute. I think we might be in Gridania, which is this forest, which is like this forest nation in 14. Yeah, so we start off with this, much like 11, it's trying to represent what it's like to actually be in the game, playing and adventuring with your friends. However, this one is less about like fighting off a single oppressive threat that's trying to kill everything and everybody, because you have to, and more about just going on adventures, you know. There's a grand narrative there where you are going to have to fight a world-ending threat, of course, but you start off as a normal adventurer. So we get to hear a bit of conversation between these guys. Also, man, this is gorgeous. Look at this. Just super pretty. The weird thing about this opening is the lack of recognizable characters. Like, I think I recognize these three, but I cannot exactly say where from because spoilers. I recognize this guy, of course, because he's kind of like the stand-in main character in the 14 introduction cutscenes. I'm opting for this one instead of the A Realm Reborn cutscene, because this was when the game was launched, before it was relaunched as A Realm Reborn, which I've always seen like Realm Reborn as effectively an expansion of the game that overwrites the original game. I'll cover it in another video if you guys would like. Also, in my experience in 14, these weird stained glass cards have never appeared. And similarly to the opening of Final Fantasy V, there's some weird like existential horror shit going on here, which I will talk about. So I think we are in La Noscea here. Looks like La Noscea, which is again an area in the game that I'm familiar with. Also, let's show off that beautiful wet hair. My goodness, this is beautiful, man. Hey, nice mitigation. And we have our Marauder here. Now he's going to turn on stance, so the creature will only attack him now, right? Turn on stance. Turn on your stance. Why? Oh, okay, so the tank switch. Got it. Just start thinking about like raid mechanics, gameplay mechanics. I actually really like this spot here. It's subtle. It's the poison effect that's actually like you can see it affecting him and burning him. It's really nice. Really pretty. Yep, there you go. Careful, you're pulling aggro off the tank. Because the guy doesn't turn his stance on. I don't know anything about original 14 mechanics, to be honest with you guys, so this could all be very, very accurate to in-game mechanics in 14. 14 original, for all I know. All I know is A Realm Reborn / everything past that mechanics. Also, weird party composition. 2 tanks, a healer, and a DPS. Weird, because typically you'd go tank, close-range DPS, long-range DPS, healer. I don't know. Just something I've noticed. So yeah, she's definitely a Thaumaturge, or yeah, definitely Thaumaturge, not Black Mage yet. Also, you could do that. You could enhance your partner's weapons like that. Didn't know you could do that. Interesting. Still pretty cool though that they fought the Marlborough. Marlborough. You guys are probably too low level to be fighting this all at once. This would be a Fate, right? Just a boss in world. Or they're just struggling with the mechanics. Oh boy. Oh, look at that, an Empire ship. Actually, I don't think I've seen these Empire ships until Heavensward. So I'm guessing they played a much larger part in the original game. Yeah, there goes a dragon of some sort. Not really familiar. They don't really look like a lot of the other dragons in the game, actually. All the dragons in 14 have this very unique, almost alien design to them, so I have no idea what the fuck that thing is. But then our hero suddenly wakes up somewhere else. It's windy. What's going on? Where am I? Boom. And so he's on the back of one of these fucking airships. Dude, open the door, get inside. Shit's bad. Just clear out the Garleans inside, you'll be okay. Oh my goodness. Like, this is terrifying. Again, are they implying that this is what you get up to in the game, just falling asleep and suddenly waking up on board a Garlean ship? I don't even know what faction these ships are. They seem to be fighting with each other, but aren't all these ships Garlean ships? I don't know the massive flagship there, I'm not familiar. But they're shooting up at something. And I didn't realize who this was until this time watching it. I've watched this one before. Is that fucking Midgardstormer? Like, is that motherfucking Midgardstormer from, well, from 14? He's my mount, he's my pet. He's also a raid boss. You fight like a weird zombified version of him. And is this how he got there in the first place? If so, that's fucking rad. Oh no, there our friend goes, there goes our bard teleporting off to ride on airships again and fight Midgardstormer. Fucking badass, man. This is what I was talking about dragon designs, by the way. Just look how crazy that thing looks. It's almost like insectoid in design. It reminds me of a Tyranid from 40k. What a badass dragon design, man. And then we just have this thing like choking the fucking airship into submission as it plummets to Earth. Man, that's badass. I'm also not used to a version of Eorzea that doesn't have the natural, like, crystal growths coming out of it like in 14 because, or like in A Realm Reborn because of the destruction. And so we have this weird collision with the Earth. I don't know what was on the ship that caused it to explode like that, because here come the primals for some reason. Like, I'm so confused at this opening. I would love someone who actually played 14 original to tell me. There's Ifrit, there's Titan. Just all the primals get let out somehow. What the fuck was on that ship? What just happened? I'm so, like, confused. Also, the idea of that many primals getting released simultaneously is terrifying, but they are around in the world in 14. Hi there, did you just have a horrific dream nightmare?
So nice of you to join us again.
Jesus, she's creepy. I'd go home after that, man. I don't know. I wouldn't want to fuck with the nightmare cards again. I don't even know what you were expecting.
Don't keep us in suspense. This one.
Also, I notice he has a crystal necklace. Is that his return crystal?
Ah, he speaks.
Can we go now?
She seemed to be in a hurry to get out of here. Huh. I wonder how... I'm curious how this ties into the regular 14 part. She also just called him a bard. Why does he have a greatsword if he's a bard? Because their main weapon's the bow and arrow. Anyway, yeah, that's the opening to the original 14. I never saw this one, actually. I saw a different one when I was younger. And it got me really excited to play this with my friends because I just wanted to play a Final Fantasy game online. And I knew it was coming to PS3. So I was very, 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 very excited. This may not be the... We're going to have to skip ahead a bit on this one because... This is the gameplay opening. Anyway, we're just going to roll right into this one. Actually, you know what? Let's open it up from the beginning, because I actually have some interesting thoughts on 15 that other people may not have. Tale of the Chosen King, Savior to the Star. So here we have the older version of Noctis at the end of the game. Any second now. Noctis Lucis Caelum. So we've got an interesting, like, Metal Gear style name tile there. And there we have Ifrit on the throne, which is kind of disappointing because when I first saw this guy, I'm just like, oh, this is the big bad behind everything. No, it's just a summon. Just summoned up. It's just an Eidolon. Ba, 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 ba. It is interesting to have a Final Fantasy game that starts right up with gameplay. However, it's purely just there until you get hit, so that it can introduce the other characters who are, again, always there for you. That's your introduction to them, is that they're there for you, they're your friends, they'll put out your flames. And there's Ignis.
Quickly, before he strikes again.
Yep. Get in the cover, stupid.
Here comes.
Gladiolus. So yeah, we're immediately introduced to these guys as like three of the best of friends fighting together against unstoppable odds. And now we flash backwards to the beginning of the game. Before the fall. Now, if I wanted to show you the opening cutscene, the 15, I'd have to show you all of Kingsglaive, which I don't want to fucking do. So we're just going to do this instead. Sounds good? Sounds good.
The decreed hour is come.
It has, indeed.
Set forth with my blessing, Prince Noctis.
Thank you, Your Majesty.
Much like a lot of things in this game, it's very sparse, but what we do get is, well, these very likable characters, and I think the performances in this game are quite good too. The thank you, Your Majesty moment is something of just like his weird attitude towards his father, where he's like, he's both your superior and he's your dad, so there's this weird mishmash of a casual and a professional relationship, which I always thought was pretty cool.
Princes will be princes. So much for royal protocol.
Not like you had to deliver a formal address.
God, this is gorgeous too. What a great looking opening. And of course, dear old dad's here to see him off properly. He saw him off as the king, now he's going to see him off as dad.
I fear I have left too much unsaid.
Mm-hmm.
You place a great burden on those who would bear with you.
You're one to talk.
I ask not that you guide my wayward son, merely that you remain at his side.
Indeed, Your Grace.
We'll see the prince to Alticia if it's the last thing.
Oh, and I forgot what Gladiolus's voice
Hate to
sounds
break this
like.
up, but Kor's got the motor running. Drados, he's in your hands.
And another thing. Do mind your manners around your charming bride-to-be.
It's fucking gorgeous, man. So yeah, this was one of those things that when I saw, like, I had my worries about 15, and when I saw this cutscene, all those worries just faded away. It was like, oh hey, they're back, they're doing their old Square Enix again. How naive was
I
I?
only know that you are ready to leave home behind.
Don't know about you, but
But I don't really have much to say about this one because it's just, it's a conversation, you know? There's some subtleties in the dialogue that I really appreciate,
The line of Lucis.
such as his dad basically saying, hey, don't control him, but just don't guide him or control him, just be by his side, be a friend to him when he needs you. And I really appreciate that. I also really appreciate how this person had to keep in their achievement when they were recording this cutscene from a video game. Real cool. I make mistakes in videos too. Don't you worry. Oh, don't you fucking worry. But yeah, this game doesn't really have that kind of classic Final Fantasy intro cutscene. We get an interesting mishmash of gameplay and cutscene, which to be honest was always a thing with Final Fantasy 15 back when it was 13. Or 13 verses. Also, yeah, okay. So originally when this game was being made, that was something that Tetsuya Nomura brought up, is the idea that he wanted many of the cutscenes to have a fully controllable camera and the ability to walk around during them. So this kind of thing was actually planned from the beginning.
I've already pushed myself to the brink of death.
Sorry, Prompto.
Come on.
What this game is really good at is just having a long road trip with your virtual friends. And I wish there was more mechanics built around that, but there is not.
Ready, steady.
And I think this is where I'm going to have to stop watching because Stand By Me is about to start playing. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up here. So yeah, Final Fantasy's openings are varied, very much like the games after 9. What you have with the Final Fantasy openings is very similar to the situation you have with a lot of the Final Fantasy games. They are these cutting-edge fantasy stories that are meant to visually impress you and seem very unique, and they're supposed to show you a kind of alien world that's a much more intense fantasy than you're used to. Early on, Final Fantasy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 all were just built around introducing you to the plot. 7 continued that going forward, but merely added to it with the higher graphical fidelity in 3D. Same thing goes for Final Fantasy 8 and 9. However, very similar to how the Final Fantasy series kind of jumped the shark into each title being its very unique own entity after 9, so did the openings. And we saw that going forward. There's a lot less connective tissue as you go on, though each one of them does have something to offer. Even the 13 opening, which I kind of flubbed and shat all over because I'm not a fan of 13, maybe I'll return to it in the next video. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed my rambling and my nostalgia over the Final Fantasy series. I really hope you had a great time. Thank you so much for watching, and if you want to see more from me, be sure to subscribe. If you want to see me stream live, be sure to check the Twitch down below. And of course, most importantly, if you want to join my humble little community, be sure to join the Discord right down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful night.
Tell that to my legs.
You guys even pushing?
Hard as I can.